what is up there, Sean.
Greetings, Edrenka. Greetings, viewers. A number of things happened this week, particularly at the eighth sitting of the House of Assembly. I'm sure you may have seen some of the dicey exchanges and answers to questions and so forth. But of particular interest is the comment, or in fact, the ministerial statements delivered by the Premier and Minister of Finance, Dr. Orlando Smith, with respect to the ongoing if I may say, assault on the BVI financial services sector and indeed other financial services around the world that are not necessarily part of the G8. Dr. Smith said the BVI financial services sector is well regulated and is founded on the basis of integrity. I would say he came out in defense of the entire financial services industry. And it was quite interesting to note the robust nature of the comments made by the Premier. I think this may be his strongest ever response to the ongoing assault by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the ICIJ, dating back to, if you recall, the Swiss leaks in 2015. There may have been others, and now the so-called Panama Papers. Basically distinguishing the BVI from some of the allegations, but also indicating that no financial center around the world is free of corruption of any form, and certainly pointing to the fact that given the well-regulated nature of the BVI financial services sector, it is the norm for incidents of corruption and so forth to be weeded out. And he really spoke to the strength of the BVI. But we're going to get more into that. Let's hear him in this clip as he points to some of the main issues.
To those who today seek to smear the good name of the BVI and offshore jurisdictions generally, must themselves be transparent about their real motivations and true message. Madam Speaker, I do not stand here to judge these critics. They're entitled to their own opinion, and I trust that their intentions are good. But I'm here to say in the clearest possible terms, we could not disagree with them more. In 2013 alone, BVI companies facilitated investments of $82.5 billion into emerging market economies. It is no exaggeration to say that in virtually every corner of the world today, there are businesses being run, profits being generated, people being employed, and local taxes being paid by companies that are domiciled in the BVI. Here in the BVI, we will not be shamed into silence at this point. We know perfectly well that while we may not be perfect in the management of our financial services system, we absolutely adhere to standards that any nation, including the wealthiest and most developed nations on earth, would be proud of. And so I say to the critics who have risen up in the wake of the Panama Papers, think carefully about what you wish for. Yes, we all agree that global corruption is a cancer that must be fought. But heaven help us if we throw the baby out with the bathwater.
You heard the Premier making note, I should say comparing the BVI with some of the more developed countries, Edrenka, and I found it quite interesting that in terms of compliance, the BVI is leading countries like the US, like the UK, Japan, and others, and certainly that is something that we don't hear much of, especially when these matters are reported in the international media.
Well, certainly, Sean, is smacks of a double standard, and I'll go as far as to say racism. I remember growing up as a young man in the United States, and even here, when you watch television and you have programs where you see people laundering money and open up secret accounts and evading taxes, Switzerland was a name. I mean, when somebody said I had a Swiss account, the connotation was you were hiding something, whether you were involved in something illegal, or you were involved in money laundering, or you just wanted to evade taxes. Switzerland is the financial services. I say the Xerox was the copies. When we say when we're going to make a copy, we say we want to make a Xerox. And so to pick on overseas territories who are well regulated, meet all international standards, have dozens of TIAs, comply with OECD, to pick on us and not mention places like Switzerland, places like Delaware, and others, and the UK itself.
That's right.
Is a double standard, and I don't understand what the constant attack is on overseas territories, small jurisdictions whose economies can only survive with this industry, and leave out all those other countries that are doing far worse than what we are doing. And I'm quite emotional. I'm quite emotional about it because, as you know, 60% of our national budget depends on financial services. That would have a major impact on our economy if we had to comply with some of the desires of the UK. And I keep thinking to myself, and we're going to celebrate the Queen's birthday in a couple of days, and I keep thinking to myself, why am I celebrating anything British? I mean, they're supposed to be protecting us. They're supposed to be looking out for our national security interests, but they're the ones that spearheading this assault, as you put it, on our financial services sector. So I think we need to think about this relationship a bit more seriously.
And I think your passion is justified, but note that the attacks are coming from different angles on that side of the fence. Oxfam is a non-profit organization, and they seem, I don't know what their agenda is, and I like the way the Premier put it. It was coded in diplomatic language, but I don't know who is funding Oxfam. I don't know much about Oxfam. Maybe I can do more research and find out who's managing it, who are some of their financiers and so forth. But certainly, they have been pressuring the UK Prime Minister, Mr. David Cameron, up to recently, indicating or suggesting rather that he has bowed to offshore financial services jurisdictions, in particular the overseas territories and crown dependencies, because they did not get that register of companies set up so they can see everyone who owns these companies, shell companies in these offshore financial services jurisdictions. And that's where the crux of the matter is. The question is always, in my mind at least, based on the evidence, who is behind Oxfam? Who really is behind ICIJ? I have done some browsing of the ICIJ website, and I'm not yet clear that they are really providing journalism, pure journalism.
Objective journalism. Yes.
And I'm using the word pure because you may argue they're being objective in some instances.
Yeah.
But certainly there is an agenda. What the agenda is, I don't know. And I think that is something that we need to scrutinize more.
Well, I think that Britain, the Prime Minister, and all the British government can do more to defend the overseas territories, particularly the BVI.
And Cameron has defended. He has said it is unfair to be attacking offshore financial service sectors, particularly
it's a day late and a dollar short. You know, really. This thing's been going on for the last 2 years, and there's not a sustained defense of the territory. When things get hot, he goes in the House in the Parliament, and he makes a statement how proud he is for the overseas territories to be part of the British family. It's costing us about $8 to $10 million a year to fight off, from a public relations standpoint, to fight off this assault on our financial services sector. And the British government needs to do more on a consistent, regular basis to defend the British Virgin Islands specifically, as well as all other overseas territories. So this one-time stand, and let me say again, Sean.
Yes.
Mr. Cameron and all of these men and the media and all these international jurisdictions, they are buddies. I mean, you know, it's naive of us to think that, you know, that the Guardian...
So we need to get our one body system going in these parts.
The Guardian is a separate entity, and these other news organizations could go ahead and print things without the Prime Minister and them knowing. And
meet at the round table at some point.
And have the opportunity to say, listen, you need to hold that story. I mean, we know how things work. You know,
and that's why I appreciate personally, from a journalistic point of view, and beyond that, the comments made by the Premier, the Premier's remarks in the House of Assembly. I really think that strength is the sort of energy you ought to portray to the international community, and of course to reassure the local, some 500,000 companies according to Harney's registered here, and to encourage other potential customers to choose BVI, to let the world know that the financial services sector here is strong. As the Premier says, it is well regulated, and therefore BVI is still open for business. Because this, as you may agree, these wave of attacks and assaults could push potential customers to Seychelles, Delaware, where I'm told some 45% of the companies registered actually disclose the names of the owners and so forth, whereas it's some 94% of the companies in BVI. So you see BVI is leading. And I hope I didn't mix up the figure for Delaware and the UK. I think the UK is actually 45 and Delaware is lower. But certainly they're way below the BVI's mark in terms of compliance.
I just want to say before we go, Sean, I've been saying for many, many years now that when the British government's interest does not coincide or it comes in conflict with the BVI interest, naturally the UK will put the UK's interest first. And that we should have expected, that we should expect. And this is such a case. And so we need to now start planning for the future. I think it's way overdue that we need to start looking at other avenues of revenue generation. We started off thinking that the fishing industry would be such a sector to develop.
Third pillar.
The third pillar. It's moving way too slow. I'm saying this on the record. It's moving way too slow. We need to push it faster. We need to get another economic pillar in the event that we have a tremendous drop off of financial services in the territory.
Because you see the direction in which things are going.
Yes, and I cannot tell you the catastrophic result.
Yeah, the implications,
yes, that it would have were we to suddenly lose financial services as a sector without a smooth transition to another industry. So we need to really start thinking seriously. And in the days ahead, I'm going to be talking more and more on my radio, particularly about what it means to lose 60% of your income.
Yes, revenue for the country. Let me crave your indulgence just to clarify what I just said relative to the percentage of compliance as it relates to the documentation of the companies registering in the UK. It's actually 45%. In Delaware, yes, in the US, it's 6%, and it's 94% here in the beautiful Virgin Islands.
Well, thank you very much for that report, Sean. That's a really important story, and I'm hoping that we will continue the discussion in the future and start bringing more important information to the public so we can start preparing ourselves for what is to come.